What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer. Today I'm going to be talking about Hanzo and the fact that Blizzard has been indicating that he'll sooner or later be getting some kind of change or rework, seemingly focused around his scatter arrow ability. Therefore, I wanted to take a look at why it's so important for Blizzard to give him a rework, and then discuss what kind of changes we could possibly see. I will say though that I'm by no means a Hanzo player, so I do apologize for the horrible gameplay footage you'll be seeing in the background. I just wanted to try to get some kind of feel for the hero before making this video, so these are the fruits of my experimentation. Anyways, without further ado, let's get to talking. To start, let's take a look at what Jeff Kaplan himself has said regarding the current state of Hanzo and his scatter arrow. Of course, there was the post he made on the Overwatch forums just recently that alluded to Blizzard looking into some kind of fix for Hanzo, but to get a better understanding of their perspective on how he should be changed, I want to take a look at a comment Jeff made on the forums back in late October. We've been talking about scatter arrow since 2014. It's always been controversial. The claim that it takes no skill is not really fair. It's a well-placed shot. It just happens to do a lot of damage, and doesn't feel particularly good to be on the receiving end of, especially for someone like Orisa. The fantasy of shooting into someone's feet is clearly not what we're going for, but that's where we're at right now. In his current state, if you just nerfed scatter, Hanzo would be pretty anemic. If anything, he needs some help right now, so it's tricky with Hanzo. He's being heavily discussed right now. So there are three main points in this comment that stand out to me, and I think they were intentionally stated by Jeff to indicate Blizzard's mindset. These are: 1. It doesn't feel good to be on the receiving end of scatter arrow. 2. The way in which scatter arrow is being used at this point isn't what Blizzard wants or intended. And 3. Hanzo as a hero is in a tricky position in that tampering with scatter arrow could easily make him terrible. So I actually want to go through these points backwards, starting at the risk of breaking Hanzo. This, I believe, is why we haven't seen any changes for him since Jeff made this post over 2 months ago now. Given that Hanzo is very dependent on scatter arrow, and it's arguably the most important ability in his kit, adjusting it could not only result in him becoming the worst hero in the game, but also possibly make him overpowered. This is why we haven't seen any kind of simple number tweaking for him. If all it took was to raise or lower his damage or ability cooldowns, then I'm sure we would have already seen something done for him over the past few months. Undoubtedly, Blizzard has something more substantial in mind for him, but are most likely afraid of making him the next Roadhog, where a rework to his kit actually ends up nerfing him so badly that he's basically unplayable at every skill tier. If anything, I'm betting that Blizzard will be trying to buff Hanzo overall via this impending rework. Moving on to the next point Jeff made, we have the fact that scatter arrow isn't being used as Blizzard intended. While I'm sure the ability to scatter someone's feet was considered by the development team before release, it seems safe to say that they didn't assume it would be the primary use for the ability. Another good comparison to make here would be to D.Va prior to getting her micro-missiles rework. Her previous buffs to defense matrix, which did in a way make her more balanced, ultimately ended up making her best played as a supplement to Reinhardt, where she was capable of standing around and absorbing huge amounts of damage. This wasn't what Blizzard wanted her to do, and was one of the reasons they reworked her to function more as a dive menace or bully instead of a team shield. That's what she was originally designed and intended to be, and the micro-missiles rework fit her back into that spot. Looking now at the final of Jeff's points, we have the fact that being on the receiving end of scatter arrow sucks. As a tank main, I know this probably more than anyone. Getting one shot as a full health Zarya or Orisa feels horrible. And you can argue that I just need to get better at positioning or be more aware of my surroundings, but that doesn't remove the fact that when it happens, it isn't fun. Getting insta-killed by a Widowmaker headshot, which even as a tank can happen under certain circumstances, doesn't feel nearly as bad. Heck, even being headshotted by Hanzo's tree trunks feels better than being scattered in the feet. Explaining exactly why one of these kinds of death feels worse than the other is a bit difficult, but it's something that a large portion of the Overwatch community will agree on. Undeniably, for whatever reason, getting scatter arrowed in the feet sucks. But the more important thing to note is that an ability or playstyle being unfun for either the person playing as or against that hero is absolutely a justifiable reason for Blizzard to make changes. The comparisons I made earlier to Roadhog and D.Va getting reworked were largely done because something about those heroes felt really bad to be on the receiving end of. For D.Va, it was her defense matrix being able to easily eat so many other heroes' ultimates. For Roadhog, it was the horrible feeling of getting dragged into his hook combo that could one-shot most of the heroes in the game. Wait a minute, a one-shot ability that, if mastered, can be used to consistently kill most enemy players? But again, I think the only reason we haven't seen any kind of rework for Hanzo yet is the risk of making him literally the next Roadhog, 6 feet under and all. But it isn't even just these few. Lucio's damage output and auras were reworked to make him more engaging to play, and more recently, Mercy's entire kit got overhauled to make her more fun all around. So clearly the fun aspect of a hero and their abilities, both playing as and against, are justifiable concerns when considering reworks. And given how much disdain there is for being the recipient of several bum-bound arrows, I think Hanzo is well deserving of some changes. Now, finally getting into what kinds of changes he could undergo, this is where things start to get a little more tricky. In my extensive research on the topic, which has spanned from reading countless forum rants to the heinous gameplay experience you've been witnessing in the background, I haven't been able to come up with a definitive answer to this problem. And given that Blizzard themselves have apparently been discussing it since 2014, I'm really not surprised. However, I have found a number of ideas that I think are well worth considering, and could easily be implemented in Hanzo's future rework. The first of these is a direct change to Scatter Arrow. Instead of it splitting when it hits an obstacle, instead it splits after a set period of time from when it was fired. It will still bounce before and after it splits, but regardless of how many times it hits something, it will only break into multiple arrows after, say, half a second from when it was fired. This could let you still clear out a small room or corridor with it, but makes it much more difficult to get the feat scatter kill, as the Hanzo player would need to know the exact distance for it to travel in order for it to bounce up at the same time that it splits. Now personally, I'm not really a fan of this idea. I think more than anything it would just make Scatter Arrow less reliable, which just doesn't seem like the right direction to take things. The second idea, however, I'm much more optimistic about, and that is to replace Scatter Arrow with not one, but a wide selection of multiple arrow types. This lineup could still include a possibly nerfed version of Scatter Arrow, but it could also include things like Bomb Arrows, which cause AoE damage around the point of impact, or how about Fire or Poison Arrows, which cause damage over time to the target they hit, or Penetrating Arrows, which could pass through multiple enemy players and or barriers. Or another type of arrow that could be really fun to play around with is a Trap Arrow, which could either set up a slowing or rooting trap wherever it lands, or just apply that effect directly to an enemy hit by it. There are a lot of cool possibilities when it comes to this kind of multi-type arrow selection, although it would certainly need a hefty amount of balancing if it were ever to be added. Also, I think adding this many ability options, all in the form of arrows he can fire, would end up making him just a really unpredictable hero to fight against, which could be either a good or a bad thing. Giving him such a wide range of options could potentially just make him more frustrating to play against, as he might just end up feeling too chaotic. Whatever changes end up being done to him, we also need to keep in mind his role as a defense hero. Defense heroes excel at area control and denial, which is something that Hanzo's Scatter Arrow actually does quite well. Is the enemy trying to push through a narrow corridor? Just loose an arrow in there and let geometry do the rest. Even as a scummy foot-aimed one-shot, any experienced player should know the threat this ability can pose, and should think twice about rounding any corners while Hanzo is on the enemy team. Regardless of whether Scatter Arrow gets reworked or replaced entirely, whatever Blizzard does for Hanzo needs to still allow him to fill this defensive role. And again, given Hanzo's already weak position in the meta, any changes done to him must also account for that. As I said before, I would be surprised if Blizzard doesn't try to buff him overall while implementing the rework. And keep in mind, I could also see him getting multiple iterations of a rework, much like we've seen recently happen to Mercy. Fine-tuning heroes is difficult, and when it comes down to it, finding perfect balance in a game like Overwatch is basically impossible. However, it's clear that the short-term answer, at least for Hanzo, isn't just to tweak the numbers on his arrow damage or ability cooldowns. Instead, a rework to Scatter Arrow and maybe even his entire kit is what we are most likely going to be seeing for him in, hopefully, the near future. Who knows? Maybe the best fix for him is something that the community simply hasn't even thought of yet. Nobody expected D.Va to get micro missiles back in the day, and yet in hindsight, they fit her quite well. So as the final note of this video, I want all of you to leave your own ideas about how to fix Hanzo, or reasons for why you think he doesn't actually need to be fixed, down in the comments below. Even if you're as inexperienced with playing him as I am, I'd love to hear your insight. Also, be sure to share your thoughts by voting in today's poll card. Don't forget to leave a like, and you can subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and turn on notifications to both help out my channel and keep up with all my future Overwatch content. This is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.